Sunlight streamed through the yellowed curtains in my bedroom. I lay there, taking my time opening my eyes, savoring the rare sensation of warmth in my old bones. At 77, every morning without pain is a true gift. I slowly sat up on the bed, fumbled for my slippers, and wandered into the kitchen. The house greeted me with its familiar silence. Ever since Beatrice had passed away 5 years ago, I'd never gotten used to waking up alone. My breakfast hadn't changed in decades: oatmeal, half an apple, and tea. Beatrice always said I was predictable to the point of toothache. She would have been pleased to know that even after her death, I continued to follow my usual routine. While the kettle boiled, I took the milk out of the fridge and checked the expiration date. 3 more days. Good, so that's enough until the next trip to the store. Grand Forks had never been a big city, but in the last few years it seemed even smaller to me. Or is it just me getting around less? Since retiring from North Dakota Life Insurance, my world has narrowed to a few blocks around the house: a Hornbacher's supermarket, a pharmacy, the post office, and occasionally the library. Beatrice and I used to dream of traveling after I retired. We collected booklets, marked on a map the places we wanted to visit. The global financial crisis of 2008 and her diagnosis had put an end to those plans. I stirred my oatmeal and looked out the window at the neighbor's house. The young Briggs family had recently installed a swimming pool in their yard. Their children splashed and screamed with delight from morning to night. One day, Pearl brought her grandchildren over, and they looked enviously at the neighbor's children playing. "Why don't you buy them an inflatable pool, Dad?" my daughter asked then. I muttered something about wasting money since they only come for a couple days a month. Pearl rolled her eyes and said, turning to her husband, "See, Odell? It's business as usual." My daughter never understood why Beatrice and I saved so much money. To her, we were just cheapskates, especially me. "Daddy, you have a good job. Why can't we go to the seaside like the Clark family?" she used to ask as a child. I didn't tell her about how most of my paycheck went to special medications for Beatrice that insurance didn't cover, or about how I was picking up extra shifts to pay for experimental therapy that we were promised could extend her mother's life. Beatrice insisted we not tell Pearl about the seriousness of her condition. "I don't want her to live with that burden," my wife said. And I agreed, though I realize now that it was a mistake. Pearl grew up with the belief that her father was a miserly miser who loved money too much to spend it on his own family. After high school, she went to the University of North Dakota in Grand Forks. We couldn't afford to send her to a prestigious college on the East Coast as she had dreamed. This became another stone in my garden. During her studies, Pearl met Odell Reeves, an ambitious young man from the economics department. They married right after graduation. Odell got a job at a local bank and quickly moved up the career ladder. By the time he was 30, he was a branch manager. I finished my tea and looked at the clock. 9 o'clock in the morning. Time to get ready for the store. Tuesdays at Hornbacher's are senior citizen discounts. I'd carefully made a shopping list last night so I wouldn't spend too much. Old habits die hard. The walk to the supermarket took about 20 minutes at a leisurely pace. I loved these walks. They gave me a chance to think and stretch my legs. Lately I'd been thinking more and more about Pearl and the grandchildren. Caden, the oldest, is already in middle school. Abigail had just started 3rd grade. I only saw them a few times a year, usually on holidays or when Pearl needed some help around the house. After Beatrice died, Pearl suggested I sell the house and move into a nursing home. "You'll be taken care of there, Dad, and you won't have to live alone." I said no. This house is all I have left of my life with Beatrice. Every corner, every single thing holds her memory. I think Pearl was disappointed I refused. Maybe she was hoping to cash in on the sale of the house, or maybe she just wanted to get rid of the need to visit me. After that conversation, she started showing up even less often. At the supermarket, I methodically moved between the rows, strictly following the list: vegetables, fruit, bread, milk. As I passed the checkout line, I noticed an advertisement for the state lottery. The jackpot had grown to $5 million. I never played lotteries, considering them a waste of money. Beatrice sometimes bought a ticket for her birthday, dreaming of a big win. "Imagine, Ebner, we could see the whole world," she'd say, and I'd just shake my head, smiling at her naivety. I don't know what pushed me to buy a ticket that day. Maybe it was the memory of Beatrice, maybe the fatigue of years of frugality, or maybe simple curiosity. I handed the cashier $20 and received a ticket and change in return. "The raffle is this Saturday. Good luck," she said with a smile. I stashed the ticket in my wallet and forgot about it. Saturday night, I watched the news on TV as usual. After the weather forecast, the lottery drawing started. I remembered the ticket and took it out of my wallet, not expecting anything special. The hostess announced the first number with a dazzling smile. 27. I looked at my ticket. 27. A coincidence. 32. 32. Another coincidence. When the last number, the sixth, was called and it also matched my ticket, I couldn't believe my eyes. I double-checked it several times. All the numbers matched. I sat in my old chair, clutching the ticket in my hands, and I couldn't move. $5 million. A sum I couldn't have earned in my entire life. I thought about what Beatrice would have said. She would have laughed and said, "See, Ebner, sometimes you have to believe in miracles." My first impulse was to call Pearl, to share my joy, to tell her that now I'd be able to help pay for my grandchildren's college, maybe even buy them that very pool. But I stopped myself. Something told me I shouldn't rush into it. I remembered how some of the neighbors' attitudes toward Malcolm Shepard had changed when he'd won big at the casino. Suddenly he had a lot of friends and distant relatives in need of help. The next day I went to the lottery office to check my ticket and inquire about the procedure for claiming my winnings. The employee confirmed that my ticket was the winning ticket. I could choose between receiving the entire amount in installments over 20 years or receiving a smaller amount in a lump sum after taxes. I chose the second option. After all the deductions, about $2.5 million was to be transferred to my account. I asked to keep the information about the winnings confidential. The employee explained that under state law, the names of the winners were public information, but they could keep the winnings out of the press if I didn't want publicity. I was grateful for that. When I got home, I sat in Beatrice's chair by the window for a long time, pondering what to do next. Money had never been the goal of my life. Beatrice and I dreamed of traveling, not because of luxury hotels or expensive restaurants, but because of a desire to see the world, to experience other cultures. Now that I had that opportunity, I had no one to share those experiences with. I was thinking about Pearl and the grandchildren. Despite our complicated relationship, they are my family, all I have left. Maybe this unexpected win is a chance to mend the relationship, show Pearl that I'm not the cheapskate she thinks I am. To let her know that all those years of saving were a necessity, not a whim. I remembered overhearing Pearl and Odell talking in the kitchen once. They thought I was taking an afternoon nap as usual. "He's probably saving up money somewhere," Odell was saying. "Guys like your father always have a stash. The question is whether we'll find it when the time comes." Pearl chuckled. "Unless he spent all the money on medicine for Mom. You know how obsessed he was with her treatment." Their words hurt me deeply at the time, but I never showed that I knew about that conversation. A week later, the money arrived in my account. I decided not to change my lifestyle drastically, not to buy a new car or house or throw money around. Instead, I carefully crafted a plan. I will invest most of the amount to ensure that I can grow old comfortably without having to save money on medicine or food. Some of the money will go toward educational accounts for my grandchildren so they can attend any college of their choice. I've also decided to spend some of it on something Beatrice and I have dreamed of, traveling. But going anywhere alone at my age seemed too difficult and lonely an endeavor. Then it hit me. I could organize a family trip. for Pearl and Odell and the grandchildren, and myself. Maybe 2 weeks together, away from the everyday, would help us bond. Maybe Pearl would finally see me not just as a stingy old man, but as a loving father and grandfather. I remembered a few years ago when Pearl was talking about a colleague of hers who had returned from a vacation on some tropical island. "You should have seen the pictures, Dad. White sand, azure sea, swanky hotel. She and her husband have been saving for this trip for 3 years. I told Odell that I want to go there too, but he just laughed and said that we, with our mortgage and children's expenses, will not get such a vacation. I decided it was perfect. I'll give my daughter and her family what she dreams of, and maybe we can finally put past hurts behind us and start fresh." With that thought, I went to bed feeling like I had a purpose for the first time in a long time. Tomorrow I would begin planning our journey. The next morning I woke up with a firm intention to carry out my plan. After eating breakfast, I pulled out of my closet my only suit that I only wore to funerals and weddings. The last time I'd worn it was for Beatrice's funeral. The suit hung too loosely. I'd lost a lot of weight over the years. I pulled the belt up one notch and looked at myself in the mirror. An old man with a wrinkled face and sparse gray hair stared back at me. "Are you sure you can handle this ride, Ebner?" I asked my reflection. But the decision had already been made. There were several travel agencies located in downtown Grand Forks. I chose the one that looked the most solid northern lights, with large windows displaying pictures of tropical beaches and European sights. The bell above the door jingled as I stepped inside. The office was larger than I expected, with several desks where agents sat. Most of them were on the phone or working at computers. In the center stood a round counter with brochures and catalogs. I walked over to it and began tentatively looking through the offerings, not quite sure where to start. "Can I help you with something?" I turned around and saw a young man about 35 years old with a friendly smile and a trendy haircut. His name tag read Harlan Tate, Senior Travel Counselor. "Yes, I stammered, suddenly feeling unsure. "I'd like to arrange a vacation for my family." "That's great." Harlan smiled even wider. "Please have a seat." He pointed to a chair by his desk. "Tell me what you have in mind. Where would you like to go? How many people are planning a trip for?" I sat down in the chair with my hands in my lap. 3 adults and 2 children. My daughter, her husband, me, and 2 grandchildren. "That's great. What kind of destination are you interested in? Beach vacation, sightseeing tour, maybe a cruise?" "Beach," I said confidently. "My daughter has long dreamed of a tropical island, with white sand and blue water. We have many such destinations." Harlan turned to the computer. "Caribbean, Maldives, Seychelles, Fiji. What's your budget for this trip?" I hesitated. Before, I would have automatically chosen the most economical option. But now it was different. "I want something special," I said firmly. "Something my daughter would remember for the rest of her life. Money, not a problem." Harlan raised his eyebrows in surprise, but quickly returned his professional expression. "In that case, let me offer you St. James Island. It's a true gem of the Caribbean, an exclusive resort that can only be reached by private jet from St. Thomas. Snow-white beaches, crystal-clear water, amazing service, and almost no tourists, since there's only one 50-room hotel on the island." He turned the monitor around to show me the pictures. The island looked like a picture from an advertising brochure. Turquoise sea, white sand, palm trees leaning over the water, and elegant bungalows along the coast. "It looks perfect," I murmured. "I assure you it really does. I was there myself last year with my wife. It was unforgettable. The staff knows every guest by name, the beach is never crowded, the food is amazing. And importantly for family vacations, there is a children's club with professional animators. Your grandchildren will love it." I began to imagine Pearl and the kids enjoying this paradise. Maybe Odell and I would finally find common ground, sitting on the veranda with a glass of wine and watching the sunset. Maybe Pearl will finally realize that I've always wanted only the best for her. How much will it cost? I asked bluntly. Harlan named an amount that took my breath away. Before, I would have gotten up and left immediately upon hearing such a figure. But now I just nodded. Okay, I'll take that option. 2 weeks. Harlan looked surprised, but quickly started typing something on the keyboard. Excellent choice, Mr. Holt. Ebner Holt. Mr. Holt, when would you like to go? We discussed dates, and I chose early August when the grandchildren would be on vacation. Harlan offered me several accommodations, and I chose the most luxurious, a 3-bedroom villa with a private pool and direct access to the beach. Did you know that St. James also has a spa with a wide range of treatments? Harlan asked as he continued to fill out the booking form. I would recommend adding the spa package for adults. It's a great way to relax and rejuvenate. Yes, add that too, I agreed. We spent almost 2 hours discussing the details of the trip. Harlan was patient and attentive, answering all my questions and suggesting various options. When we were done, I had booked perhaps the most luxurious family trip imaginable. There are just a few formalities to take care of, Harlan said. The trip will be in your name as the primary payer. I'll need the full names of all travelers as they appear in their passports for tickets and insurance. I gave him all the information he needed, including the names of Pearl, Odell, and the grandchildren. Fine, Harlan printed out some documents and handed them to me. Here are all the details of the reservation. Full payment is due 30 days before departure. You can pay now or later, as you like. I'll pay now, I said, pulling out my checkbook. After the paperwork was completed, Harlan handed me an elegant folder with the Northern Lights logo on it, containing a detailed description of the resort, a program of activities, a map of the island, and of course, all the booking documents. You've given a terrific gift to your family, Mr. Holt, Harlan said, shaking my hand goodbye. They will be very happy. I hope so, I replied. On the way home, I stopped at a stationery store and bought a beautiful envelope in which I put the printouts with the pictures of the resort and a letter explaining that I was giving them the trip. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time composing this letter. I wanted to express my feelings without sounding too sentimental or, heaven forbid, accusatory. Dear Pearl and Odell, over the years I may not have always been the kind of father and grandfather I would like to be. Work, worries, and life circumstances have often gotten in the way. Now that I'm older, I realize that the most precious thing in life is time spent with loved ones. So I want to give us all a chance to spend 2 unforgettable weeks together, away from the everyday worries. I hope this trip will bring us many happy moments and warm memories. Love, Daddy, Grandpa. I reread the letter several times before I was satisfied. Then I called Pearl and invited her and her husband to dinner the following Saturday without revealing the reason. She sounded surprised. Usually our meetings were limited to rare Sunday dinners, and she was always the initiator. But she agreed, saying she and Odell would be there around 6 in the evening. All week I'd been preparing for that dinner. I cleaned the house, though it wasn't much of a mess after so many years of being alone. I was used to keeping things in order. I made the menu, bought better groceries, even ordered a cake from the best pastry shop in town. I wanted everything to be perfect. On Saturday, I got up early and spent the day in the kitchen preparing Pearl's favorite dishes: roasted chicken with rosemary, mashed potatoes with butter and mushroom sauce, green beans with almond petals. Beatrice had always said that the way to a daughter's heart was through her stomach, just as it was to her father's heart. The doorbell rang at exactly 6 in the evening. I took a deep breath, adjusted my tie, I was wearing my only suit again, and went to open it. Pearl looked as beautiful as ever. In her 42 years, she retained the slim figure and bright smile she had inherited from her mother. Odell was dressed impeccably as usual: expensive suit, fancy tie, shoes polished to a shine. They had brought a bottle of wine, which was unusual. They usually came empty-handed. "Papa, you look beautiful," Pearl exclaimed, kissing me on the cheek. "And you're wearing a suit. What's the special occasion?" "I just wanted to see you," I said, letting them into the house. "Come on in. Everything's ready." We sat down at the table in the parlor, which I had laid with the best tablecloth and china plates that Beatrice and I had received as a wedding present and used only on special occasions. Pearl looked around the table in surprise. "Wow, Dad, you really did a good job. Are we celebrating something?" "You could say that," I smiled. "But let's have dinner first, and then I'll explain everything." Dinner went well. Pearl praised my cooking. Odell talked about the bank, and I asked about my grandchildren. The usual polite conversation, without much depth or sincerity, but at least without the obvious tension that was often present when we met. After dessert, as we moved on to coffee, I decided the moment had arrived. I excused myself, went out to the bedroom, and returned with an envelope, which I placed on the table in front of Pearl. "What's this?" she asked, looking at the envelope curiously. "Open it and find out," I said, feeling my heart beat faster with excitement. Pearl carefully opened the envelope and took out the contents. Her eyes widened as she looked through the pictures and read my letter. "Daddy, this is St. James," she exclaimed, shifting her gaze to me. You're giving us a trip to St. James's?" "All of us," I clarified. "You, Odell, the kids, and me. 2 weeks in August. I've already booked and paid for it." Pearl jumped up from her seat and threw her arms around me. "Daddy, this is unbelievable. I don't even know what to say. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much." Odell, who was peering over Pearl's shoulder at the picture, looked impressed too. "Mr. Holt, that's very generous of you," he said, shaking my hand. "But let me ask you, how can you afford it?" Pearl gave her husband a displeased look, but I was not embarrassed by the question. I was ready for him. "I won the lottery," I said simply. "Not a huge amount, but enough to afford a gift for my family." "You won the lottery?" queried Pearl, returning to her seat. "And you didn't tell us?" "I wanted it to be a surprise," I explained. "Besides, I've only recently gotten the money. How much did you win, if it's no secret?" Odell asked, taking a sip of coffee with a deliberately nonchalant look. "Enough not to worry about the future and to allow myself some pleasures," I said evasively. I hated to admit that was the main reason I hadn't told them about the winnings right away. I knew that they would immediately start thinking about what they could spend my money on. Pearl and Odell exchanged quick glances that I couldn't decipher. Then Pearl smiled again and started looking at the brochures. "Oh my goodness, this looks absolutely amazing. Look, Odell, the villa has its own pool and a spa. I've always dreamed of a vacation like this." She continued to rave about the details of the trip, but I noticed that her enthusiasm seemed a little feigned, and Odell looked thoughtful, as if he were calculating something in his mind. I felt the slight unease, but pushed it away. They're probably just stunned by the unexpected gift. "When do we leave?" Pearl asked, going through the paperwork. "August 15th, I answered. I checked Caden and Abigail's school calendar, and they'd still be on vacation. "Oh, that's perfect!" Pearl clapped her hands together. "The kids will love it, I'm sure. They've never been to a real tropical island." The conversation turned to discussing the details of the trip. What clothes to take, whether we should buy new swimsuits, what to tell the kids. But every now and then I noticed Pearl and Odell exchanging strange glances, as if they were having a silent conversation from which I was excluded. "What about the passports?" Odell suddenly asked. "Do you have a valid passport, Mr. Holt?" "Yes. I renewed it 2 years ago when I went to my cousin's funeral in Canada," I answered. "It's valid for another 8 years." "And the health insurance?" Odell kept asking. "That's important at your age." "It's all included in the trip," I pointed to the document. Full coverage for everyone on the trip, including medical care and emergency evacuation. Great, Odell nodded, but I noticed his smile didn't reach his eyes. As the evening wore on, we discussed various aspects of the upcoming trip. Pearl leafed through the brochures, admiring the pictures of the turquoise sea and the luxurious rooms. Odell was interested in practical details, airport transfers, flight schedules, cancellation conditions. I answered every question, delighted by their obvious interest in the trip. But something still bothered me. Perhaps it was my paranoia, developed from years of working as an insurance appraiser where I learned to spot the slightest signs of fraud or underhandedness. Or maybe it was intuition, telling me that not everything was as simple as it seemed. Something about their behavior seemed fake. Pearl's overplayed enthusiasm, Odell's over-businesslike approach, those strange glances. But I decided to ignore it. After all, we've all gotten a little tired of being sincere with each other over the years. Perhaps they just need time to get used to the idea of going on vacation together. Perhaps on the island, away from the everyday worries and old grudges, we can finally find our way back to each other. As they were about to leave, Pearl gave me another big hug. "Thank you, Dad. That's the best gift you could have given me. I just want us to spend time together," I replied, "as a family." "I will," she smiled, but for some reason it didn't seem genuine. I stood at the door, waving goodbye as they got into their expensive SUV. Even though the evening had gone well, I couldn't shake off a vague unease. Something was wrong, but I couldn't figure out what it was. Perhaps I had expected too much from the evening. Or maybe the years of estrangement couldn't be overcome with one expensive gift. I closed the door and walked back into the living room, where dirty plates and unfinished cups of coffee still stood. I started clearing the table, thinking about the upcoming trip. Despite all my doubts, I sincerely hoped that this trip would help us grow closer. 2 weeks flew by. I spent them in pleasant excitement, preparing for the upcoming trip. I bought new summer clothes, sunscreen with a high protection factor, a hat with wide brim. I even bought a camera. I wanted to document our family vacation. Pearl called a few times to confirm the details of the trip and to tell me how excited the kids were about the upcoming trip, especially Abigail. She had already packed her little bag of toys and read all the ocean books she could find in the school library. The last time we spoke was 2 days before we left. Pearl said they would pick me up at 9 in the morning to catch the 11:30 flight. I asked if I needed to prepare anything special for the kids, maybe buy them coloring books or games for the flight. Pearl replied that she had already organized everything and thanked me for my concern. As we finished talking, I felt a rush of warmth. Perhaps my fears had been in vain and this trip would really bring us closer together. On the day of departure, I woke up at 6 in the morning, although the alarm clock was set for 7. I couldn't sleep with excitement. It had been a long time since I had felt such anticipation. The last time Beatrice and I had gone on vacation abroad was almost 20 years ago, before her illness. A Mediterranean cruise, inexpensive but so memorable. Beatrice joked then that the next time we would go would be when I retired and we could spend not just 1 week, but a whole month traveling. It didn't work out. I showered, shaved especially thoroughly, even spritzed on some cologne, a gift from Pearl last Christmas, still almost a full bottle. Then I checked my suitcase a third time. Passport, travel documents, medication, clothes, toiletries, everything was in place. I had an easy breakfast, toast with jam and tea. I didn't want to overload my stomach before the long journey. At 8:30, I was already sitting in a chair by the window, ready to leave. My suitcase was by the door, my light jacket hanging on the rack next to it. The forecast for Minneapolis, where our flight was leaving from, promised rain. I looked at my watch every 5 minutes, like a high school student before prom. At 9:05, I started to get a little worried. Pearl is usually punctual. Maybe the kids were cranky or there was a problem with the luggage. I decided to call to see if they were delayed. Pearl answered after the fourth dial tone, her voice sounding tense. "Yes, Dad, we were just leaving. Everything all right? Do you need help with anything?" "No, no, no, I'm fine. It's just Abby couldn't find her favorite toy, so I had to turn the house upside down." "I see. What time do you think you'll be there?" "Half an hour, tops. Don't worry, we'll be on time for the flight." I hung up, feeling a little relieved. Half an hour is no big deal. We'd still have enough time to get to Minneapolis and go through the formalities at the airport. Half an hour stretched into 45 minutes. I was getting seriously worried when I heard the sound of a car pulling up. When I looked out the window, I was surprised to see not Odell's familiar SUV, but a cab. Pearl and Odell got out of it without the kids. They spoke briefly with the driver, and he stayed in the car with the engine running. Something clenched inside me. I opened the door before they could call. "Pearl? Odell? Where are the kids? What happened?" They looked at each other, and Pearl stepped forward with a strained smile. "Dad, we need to talk." They went into the house, but they didn't take off their outer clothes and went into the living room. They stayed standing in the hallway. I noticed that Pearl was nervously rubbing the strap of her purse. "What's the matter?" I asked, feeling my anxiety rising. "Are the children sick?" "No, the kids are fine," Pearl replied. "They're at my friend Fran's. You see, Dad, there's been a bit of a problem with the booking." "What kind of problem?" My gaze shifted to Odell, who studiously avoided looking me in the eye. "It turns out that our villa only sleeps 4, not 5 as we thought," Pearl continued. "We called the hotel, but all the rooms are occupied. It's the height of the season." "But the description of the villa said 3 bedrooms, I objected. "I checked it myself." "Yes, but one of them turned out to be a child's room with bunk beds," Odell interjected. "It's perfect for kids, but you wouldn't be comfortable there." I looked at them puzzled. "But I can sleep in a regular bed, or even the couch in the living room if you want." Pearl looked at Odell again, and he nodded faintly. "It's not just that, Dad," she sighed. "We've been talking to the travel agent, Harlan. Turns out there's another problem. There's construction work going on right next to our villa on the island. Noise, dust. They warned me that it would be difficult for the elderly. I felt my anger starting to boil up inside me, but I tried to stay calm. "Pearl, I'm not as infirm as you and Odell seem to think. A little noise won't kill me." "But it's tropical heat out there, Daddy," Pearl said faster now, as if in a hurry to end an unpleasant conversation. "And mosquitoes. You know how your skin reacts to bites. Remember last year when you had an allergic reaction to the bite of an ordinary mosquito? And there's tropical insects, maybe even malarial insects." "Pearl," I interrupted her, no longer hiding my irritation. "I bought insurance. I brought all the necessary medications. I consulted a doctor before the trip. Everything's going to be fine." Odell finally looked at me straight. "Mr. Holt, we're really worried about your health. Besides, children can be noisy. It'll be hard for you to rest." "I'm their grandfather," I reminded him. "I love their noise." Pearl put her hand on my shoulder. "Daddy, listen. We've thought it over and we've decided it's better for you to stay home, for your own good. We'll bring you some souvenirs, show you some pictures. And then maybe we'll go someplace closer to home where it's not so hot. Canada, for instance." I stepped back, dropping her hand. "Pearl, I paid for this trip. I spent almost $30,000 on this vacation, for all of us. And now you're telling me I'm not going?" "We'll pay you back," Odell said quickly, "as soon as we get back." "It's not about the money," I exclaimed, feeling my voice shake. "It's about spending time with you, with my family. Is that so hard to understand?" Pearl looked guilty, but only for a moment. "We understand, Dad, and we appreciate your gift. We really do. But we also care about your health. You're 77 years old. Traveling like this can be dangerous at your age." I looked at my daughter and didn't recognize her. Or maybe it was the other way around. I finally saw the real her, without masks and pretenses. "You've already decided everything, haven't you?" I asked quietly. "When I showed you the ticket, you decided right away that you would go without me." They were silent, and that silence was more eloquent than any words. "The cab's waiting, Pearl," Odell said at last, looking at his watch. "We'd better go." Pearl stepped toward me and hugged me awkwardly. "Don't be angry, Dad. We're doing this for your own good. Next time we'll all go together, I promise." I stood still, not responding to the hug. When she pulled away, I looked her straight in the eye. "The pass is in my name, Pearl. You can't check into the hotel without me." There was a look of concern on her face, but Odell intervened. "We've already cleared it with the hotel. They'll make an exception." Sure, I thought. Odell knows how to negotiate, especially when it comes to expensive resorts and big money. "We gotta go," Odell repeated, grabbing the doorknob. "The plane won't wait." "Dad, please don't take offense." Pearl squeezed my hand. "We'll call as soon as we get there." I nodded silently, not trusting my voice. They got out, got into a cab, and drove away. I stood in the doorway, staring after them. My suitcase was still at the door, ready for the trip that was never going to happen. Closing the door, I walked slowly into the living room and sank heavily into a chair. Feelings overwhelmed me: resentment, anger, frustration, humiliation. I sat motionless, staring at one point, trying to realize what had just happened. My own daughter and her husband had effectively stolen my gift, leaving me aside as an unwanted item. Suddenly I felt something inside me break. Or maybe it was the other way around. Something, long held back, burst out. Rage. Pure, undiluted rage. I jumped up from my chair and paced the room. No, I wouldn't let them do this to me. Not this time. I rushed to the phone and dialed the number of the travel agency. The receptionist's voice answered after the second beep. "Northern Lights Travel Agency, how can I help you?" "I need to speak to Harlan Tate urgently," I said, trying to speak calmly. "This is Ebner Holt." "One moment, Mr. Holt, I'll connect you." As the music played on the receiver, I tried to collect my thoughts. What would I tell Harlan? How would I explain the situation? But when I heard his voice, the words came out of my mouth. "Harlan, I have a problem. My daughter and son-in-law just left for the airport without me. They said that there was no room for me in the villa, that there was construction work and mosquitoes, and that the hotel would let them check in without me, even though the reservation was in my name." Harlan exhaled in surprise. "Mr. Holt, there is some mistake. First of all, your villa has 3 full bedrooms. There is more than enough space. Secondly, there are no construction works near your villa. And thirdly, they really can't check in without you. The hotel policy is very strict in this respect." "They said they had made an agreement with the administration," I repeated Odell's words. "That's impossible," Harlan said confidently. "I personally know the hotel manager, Mr. Pratt. He never makes exceptions to the rules. If the reservation is in your name, no one can get the keys to the villa without you. They can fly to the island, but then they have to go back or find another place to stay at their own expense." I was strangely relieved. At least their plan wouldn't work. But then I realized that meant a lost vacation and wasted money. "What do I do, Harlan?" I asked, feeling suddenly very tired. Harlan was silent for a second and then asked, "Do you still want to go, Mr. Holt?" "Yes," I answered without hesitation. "More than ever." "Then I have an idea." Harlan's voice had a conspiratorial note. "Your daughter and son-in-law are connecting to Miami, right?" "Yes, as far as I know." "There's a direct flight to St. Thomas that leaves Minneapolis at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. If you catch it, you'll get to the island before they do. They'll be stuck in Miami for at least 3 hours because of the layover." I glanced quickly at my watch. It was only 10:15 now. "Am I going to make it?" "If you leave right now, yes. I'll book you on this flight. Do you have your passport and all your documents with you?" "Yes, everything's ready." I was supposed to fly today, remember? Good, said Harlan. Then listen carefully. I'm going to book your ticket now and send an email confirmation to your email. Get to the airport, print your boarding pass from the machine. Have your passport and original travel documents with you. Do you have them? Yes, of course. I didn't give them to anyone. That's fine. When you get to St. Thomas, go straight to the transfer desk on St. James. Show them your ID and tell them you're the primary reservation holder. They will take you to the island. When you get to the hotel, talk to Mr. Pratt, explain the situation. I'll contact him too and notify him of your early arrival. The plan sounded logical, but I still had my doubts. What about Pearl and Odell when they arrive? Harlan grinned. Well, that's up to you, Mr. Holt. You can either let them join you in the villa or you can let them look for other lodgings. There are a couple of other hotels on the island, but they're much more modest and expensive. I imagined the look on Pearl and Odell's faces when they found out their plan had failed, and I felt grim satisfaction. I'm going, I said firmly. Book me on that flight. Already on it, Harlan said. Check your mail in 5 minutes. And Mr. Holt, good luck. I thanked him and hung up. Then I went quickly into the bedroom where there was an old computer. Turning it on, I opened the mailbox. A few minutes later, an email arrived from Harlan confirming the reservation. I printed it out, folded it with the rest of my papers, and put it in my jacket pocket. Then I called a cab. The dispatcher informed me that the car would be there in 10 minutes. That was just enough time to check the suitcase again, make sure all the windows and doors were locked, and turn off all the electrical appliances. Standing at the door with the suitcase, I felt strangely calm. For the first time in years, I was acting decisively, not letting others decide for me. It was liberating. The cab pulled up exactly at the appointed time. The driver, a young guy with tattoos on his arms, helped me load my suitcase into the trunk. Minneapolis Airport, please, I said, getting into the back seat. And I'm in a hurry to catch the 2 o'clock flight. Don't worry, Grandpa, the driver smiled, starting the engine. I'll get you there on time. Have you planned a vacation? Yes, I answered, looking out the window at the house. And it looks like it's going to be more interesting than I thought. The plane left the runway at precisely 14.5. I gripped the armrests of my seat tightly. I'd never liked the takeoff and landing moments. Beatrice always laughed about it, saying I was a daredevil in the car and a frightened child on the airplane. She used to hold my hand at times like this. Now there was a full middle-aged woman sitting next to me, completely absorbed in reading a magazine. I was grateful for this proximity. No talking. No questions about the purpose of my journey. As the plane gained altitude and leveled off, I relaxed a bit. I took the documents out of my jacket pocket and looked through them once again, even though I already knew the contents by heart. All the formalities had been observed. The voucher was indeed in my name as the primary payer and reservation holder. Pearl and Odell were listed as accompanying persons. Without my presence, they really couldn't check into the hotel, despite Odell's assurances. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. The events of the morning were still replaying in my mind, their faces, their words, their blatant lies. How could they do that? Leave me at home, taking my gift, my money, my dream of a family vacation, and all under the pretext of taking care of my health. You're 77 years old. Traveling like this can be dangerous at your age. As if age automatically makes one helpless, unable to enjoy life. The flight attendant offered drinks. I ordered tomato juice, a habit left over from when we flew with Beatrice. She always said that tomato juice tasted especially good at altitude because of the change in pressure and humidity. I'm not sure if that's true, but I've always ordered it on flights ever since. As I drank the juice, my thoughts went back to Pearl, her childhood, the way she used to be. A cheerful, inquisitive little girl with pigtails who waited for me to come home from work every night to show me her drawings or tell me about school. When did that change? When did this wall of misunderstanding and alienation grow between us? Perhaps it started with Beatrice's illness. We hid the seriousness of her mother's condition from Pearl. We didn't want to frighten her. But as a result, she saw only the outside. How I refused her new clothes or a school trip without explaining that the money was being used for Beatrice's experimental treatment. How I spent my evenings leaning over papers, calculating how to split my paycheck between the mortgage, medical bills, and everyday expenses instead of playing with her or helping her with her homework. And then there was Odell. Ambitious, pragmatic, always knowing what he wanted. He saw Pearl as a beautiful, insecure girl, easily manipulated. I remember their first meeting at our house. He was impeccably polite, complimentary, attentive, but in his eyes I noticed a cold calculation. Being an insurance appraiser has taught me to see right through people. I knew at once that he didn't like Pearl. She was just a stepping stone to the world of respectable middle-class families from which he didn't come. I tried to warn Pearl, but she only laughed. "You're just jealous, Dad. You're afraid I'll grow up and leave you." I didn't insist. I didn't want to ruin her happiness. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe he really did love her. But the years have shown that my intuition was right. Odell used Pearl as a housewife and mother of his children while he built a career for himself. He was always stingy with displays of affection or attention. I noticed Pearl sometimes looking at happy couples in the park or at a restaurant with ill-concealed envy. But she never complained, only said, "It's different with Odell and me, Daddy. We're more practical." The plane shook slightly. The seatbelt signal lit up. The captain announced over the loudspeaker that we were entering a turbulent zone, but there was nothing to worry about. I gripped the armrest tighter and tried to think of something pleasant. Somehow, I remembered going fishing with Pearl when she was about 10 years old. Beatrice had been visiting her mother in Chicago, and it had been just the two of us for a whole week. Every morning we would get up at dawn, take our fishing rods, and go to the lake. Pearl was a patient fisherwoman. She could sit still for hours waiting for a nibble. We rarely caught anything, but it didn't matter. What mattered was the quiet happiness we shared. After the turbulence was over, lunch was brought. Standard airplane food, dry chicken, tasteless rice, salad with stringy vegetables. I ate mechanically, unable to taste. My thoughts continued to revolve around Pearl and Odell. Their betrayal hurt almost physically. How could they do such a thing? Did money and luxurious vacations mean more to them than my feelings? I remembered how many times I'd helped them with the down payment on the house, with paying for Caden's private school when he'd gotten in trouble at the regular one. How many times I'd babysat the kids when they needed a couple's vacation. I never asked for anything in return, never reminded them of those favors. But apparently, to them, my generosity was something taken for granted, something to be enjoyed without gratitude or respect. After lunch, I tried to take a nap, but sleep wouldn't come. I pulled a book out of my bag, a detective book I'd bought especially for the flight. But the words were blurring before my eyes, not forming into sentences. Putting the book aside, I decided to just stare out the window. White clouds floated below, and sometimes the land peeked through the breaks. Tiny houses, winding ribbons of rivers, geometrically correct squares of fields. As we flew over Florida, the clouds parted, revealing views of turquoise water and white beaches. As we approached the Caribbean Sea, I began to distinguish individual islands, green specks in the middle of the ocean blue. One of them was to be my home for the next 2 weeks. Suddenly, the joyful anticipation I had felt that morning as I prepared to leave returned to me. Yes, the trip didn't go as I had planned, but I'm still going on vacation. I'm still going to enjoy the sun, sea, and relaxation. And maybe it's even for the best that I'll be alone. No strained smiles, no trying to please, no stress of constantly trying to make relationships with people who don't care about me. By the time the captain announced the start of the descent, my mood had improved considerably. I felt a strange lightness, as if I had shed a heavy weight that I had been carrying for years. The weight of the illusion that my daughter still cared for me, that we could be a real family. We landed on St. Thomas at 16:20 local time. The airport was small but modern. After going through passport control and getting my luggage, I headed for the gate where, according to Harlan's instructions, there should have been a representative of the company organizing the transfers to St. James. A swarthy man in a white shirt with the logo of the Paradise Corner Resort, where I'd booked my villa, stood at the exit. He held a sign that read, "Mr. Holt." I approached him. "Good afternoon. I'm Ebner Holt." The man smiled broadly. "Welcome to St. Thomas, Mr. Holt. My name is Joseph, and I will be escorting you to St. James. Your plane is waiting for us." He took my suitcase and we headed out of the terminal. Outside, the humid tropical air filled me with the smells of salt water, flowers, and exotic fruits. The sun was shining brightly, but was already slipping toward the horizon. "We've been lucky with the weather," Joseph said as he helped me into the small van. It had been raining all last week. It took about 20 minutes to get to the private airfield. We drove past picturesque coves, palm groves, and small villages with colorful houses. Joseph was a born tour guide. He talked about the island's history, its culture, its sights. I listened half-heartedly, still immersed in my own thoughts. A small airplane was waiting for us at the airfield, I think, for 8 passengers. Besides me, there were 2 other couples who looked like newlyweds. They were holding hands and whispering about something, looking at each other with loving eyes. I looked away, feeling an unwelcome sadness. Beatrice and I had been like that once. The flight to St. James took about half an hour. From above, the island looked like a paradise. White beaches, turquoise water, green hills in the center of the island. When we landed and got off the plane, we were greeted with refreshing drinks and wet towels, an unexpected but pleasant detail of service. A boat was waiting at the pier to take us to the hotel. As we sailed along the coast, I couldn't take my eyes off the stunning views. The sun was almost touching the horizon, coloring the sky and water in shades of pink and gold. The air was filled with salty breezes and the smell of exotic flowers. Despite all the vicissitudes of the day, I began to feel peaceful. The Paradise Corner Hotel exceeded all my expectations. The main colonial-style building was immersed in lush tropical vegetation. Along the beach were individual villas, each with its own small garden and access to the beach. We were greeted by the staff with cocktails and flower garlands. The young couples were immediately surrounded by attention. They were escorted to the front desk and helped with their luggage. I was a little behind, feeling out of place amidst this atmosphere of romance and luxury. A tall, gray-haired man in an immaculate white suit came up to me. "Mr. Holt? Welcome to Paradise Corner. I'm Richard Pratt, the hotel manager. Your travel agent, Mr. Tate, contacted me and explained the situation. Please accept my apologies for the inconvenience you have had to endure." I shook the outstretched hand. "Thank you, Mr. Pratt. I appreciate your consideration. Please come into my office," he said, gesturing for me to follow him. "I think we need to discuss some details of your stay." We walked through the spacious lobby, decorated with tropical flowers and works of local artists, and entered a cozy office overlooking the ocean. Mr. Pratt motioned for me to sit down and ordered tea. "Mr. Tate told me about your situation," he began as the drinks were brought to us. "I must say I'm very sorry for the way your relatives acted. It's not only disrespectful to you, but it's made things difficult for us." I sighed. "I understand, and I apologize for dragging you into family problems." Mr. Pratt shook his head. "You have nothing to apologize for. You are our guest, and we will do everything we can to make your vacation enjoyable. I checked your reservation. Indeed, the villa is booked and paid for in your name. You have every right to occupy it." "What will happen when my daughter and son-in-law arrive?" I asked. "That's up to you, Mr. Holt," Pratt replied. According to the rules of the hotel, only the person in whose name the reservation is made can occupy a room or villa. If you authorize it, we can put them in with you as originally planned. If not, they'll have to find other accommodations. There are a couple of other hotels on the island, but they are far inferior to ours in terms of comfort and service. I wondered. Part of me wanted to teach Pearl and Odell a lesson, to make them feel the consequences of what they'd done. But the other part, the part that still remembered the little girl with the pigtails who ran toward me when I came home from work, couldn't be so cruel. I haven't decided yet, I said honestly. I need time to think it over. Of course, Mr. Pratt nodded. You have time before they arrive. According to my information, they'll be here tomorrow morning around 10 o'clock. There's something else, I said, making up my mind. I hesitated, not knowing how to phrase my request. Mr. Pratt waited patiently, not rushing me. When they arrive, I finally continued, I would like the police to be present, not for arrest or anything like that, I hastened to explain, seeing the surprise on his face. Just as official witnesses, so they'd understand the seriousness of the situation. Mr. Pratt rubbed his chin thoughtfully. It's an unusual request, Mr. Holt, but I understand your motives. There is a small police station on the island. I know the chief of police, Captain Rivera. I think he will not refuse us such a request, especially if I explain the situation. I'd be very grateful, I said. Consider it settled. Mr. Pratt nodded. And now, let me show you your villa. I am sure you are tired from your journey and would like to rest. We left the office and headed down the well-maintained path to the beach. On the way, Mr. Pratt talked about the resort, its history, and the services they offered. I listened attentively, trying to distract myself from thoughts of my upcoming meeting with Pearl and Odell. The villa exceeded my expectations. It was spacious, elegantly furnished with a huge terrace overlooking the ocean and its own small pool. 3 bedrooms just as specified in the reservation, all spacious with large beds and private bathrooms. No nursery with bunk beds that Pearl had talked about. Another lie. This is really amazing, I said, looking around the villa. I'm glad you like it, Mr. Pratt smiled. Dinner is served in the main restaurant from 7 to 10 in the evening. But if you prefer privacy, you can order food to the villa. Just call the butler, his number's on the phone by the bed. I have a butler, I wondered. Of course you do, Pratt nodded. It's part of our service for guests in the villas. His name is Thomas, and he'll be at your disposal from 7 in the morning until 11 at night. If you need anything at night, you can call the front desk. After Mr. Pratt left, I sat on the terrace for a while, watching the sunset. The sun was slowly sinking into the ocean, coloring the sky in incredible shades of pink, orange, and purple. The sound of the waves, the smell of salt and flowers, and the warm evening breeze all had a calming effect. I thought of Beatrice, of how she dreamed of seeing a sunset like this, about how we planned to travel after I retired. First the Caribbean, she said, then Europe, then Asia. We'll travel the world, Ebner. But life had other plans. Her illness, many years of treatment, hopes followed by disappointments, and finally, the inevitable end. And now here I was, alone in the very paradise we dreamed of together. I could almost physically feel her presence beside me, as if she were watching this sunset with me. Enjoy it for both of us. The wind seemed to whisper to me in her voice. I didn't feel like eating dinner at the restaurant. Too many impressions from the day, too many emotions. I called the butler and ordered dinner to the villa. Thomas, a young islander with a pleasant smile, brought the food 30 minutes later. Fresh seafood, tropical fruits, a bottle of excellent white wine. I ate dinner on the terrace, listening to the sound of the waves and watching the stars light up in the sky. Here, away from the city lights, they seemed especially bright. After dinner, I called Mr. Pratt to see if he had contacted the police. He assured me that Captain Rivera would be at the dock when the morning boat with Pearl and Odell arrived. We agreed that I would be there too. Lying in bed, I couldn't sleep for a long time, despite my fatigue. Tomorrow's meeting with Pearl and Odell kept me awake. What would I tell them? How would I explain my presence here? And most of all, would I let them stay in the villa or would I send them off to find other lodgings? I imagined their faces when they would see me on the dock with the police escort. Shock, bewilderment, perhaps even fear. Did I feel pleasure at the thought? In part, yes. After all the years of neglect, after their act today, they deserved a lesson. But there was also sadness. Sadness at the realization that our relationship had reached a point where I had to resort to such measures to make my own daughter respect me. With these thoughts, I finally fell into a restless sleep, lulled to sleep by the sound of the waves and the rustling of palm leaves outside the window. I awoke at dawn when the first rays of the sun peeked through the thin curtains. At first, I couldn't understand where I was. The sounds of the sea outside the window and the smell of tropical flowers were too unusual. Then I remembered everything and sat up on the bed, feeling my heart beat faster. Today, Pearl and Odell were due to arrive. Today would be the inevitable clash that I had been both looking forward to and dreading. Stepping out onto the terrace, I marveled at the view. The ocean, calm and azure, stretched to the horizon. The beach, white and deserted, beckoned with its purity. I decided to take a walk before breakfast. I descended the wooden steps directly onto the sand and walked along the water's edge, letting the warm waves wash over my bare feet. My thoughts swirled around the upcoming meeting. I tried to anticipate what I would say, how I would behave. The anger of yesterday had subsided, replaced by a heavy sadness. Had my relationship with Pearl really deteriorated to the point where she could do that to me? What had I done wrong as a father? Where had I made the fatal mistake that had brought us to this point? When I returned to the villa, I found breakfast already served on the terrace. Thomas, my butler, greeted me with a smile. "Good morning, Mr. Holt. I saw you were up early, so I thought I'd prepare breakfast. I hope you slept well?" "Thank you, Thomas. Yes, I slept well," I said, sitting down at the table. Breakfast was wonderful. Fresh fruit, seafood omelet, freshly squeezed juices, flavored coffee. But I could barely taste it. Thoughts of the upcoming meeting interrupted my appetite. After breakfast, I showered and dressed in light cotton pants and a shirt, the dressiest I'd brought with me. I wanted to look dignified for the big moment. At 9:30, Mr. Pratt called to say that the boat from the mainland would be here in about half an hour. "Captain Riviera is already at the dock," he said. "I'll be there soon, too. Meet me at the main entrance of the hotel in 15 minutes?" I agreed and, hanging up the phone, checked my appearance once more in the mirror. The old man looking back at me from there looked tense but determined. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself down. It's going to be okay. I'm just protecting my rights, my property, nothing more. Mr. Pratt and two men in police uniforms were waiting for me at the hotel entrance. One of them, tall and distinguished with a streak of gray in his dark hair, stepped forward and held out his hand. "Captain Miguel Riviera, Mr. Holt. Mr. Pratt told me about your situation. I'm very sorry you had to face such trouble during your vacation." I shook his hand, feeling grateful for his understanding. "Thank you, Captain. I hope our presence won't cause any problems for the other hotel guests." "We will act as tactfully as possible," he assured me. I asked my assistant, Officer Cruz, to be present as a witness. The young policeman nodded to me with a serious expression on his face. We headed toward the pier. I walked slowly, feeling my heart pounding. Strangely, I suddenly thought of Beatrice. What would she say if she saw me now, walking to meet our daughter with a police escort? Would she approve of my actions? Or would she ask for more gentleness, more understanding? The pier was already filled with greeters, hotel staff with signs and guests awaiting the arrival of friends or relatives. Mr. Pratt and I and the policeman stood a little apart so as not to attract undue attention. Soon a boat appeared on the horizon. It was approaching fast, leaving a white trail on the blue water. I stared intensely at the passengers, trying to make out familiar figures. And then I saw them: Pearl in a light summer dress and wide-brimmed hat, Odell in light-colored pants and shirt. They were standing on the deck, gazing admiringly at the approaching island. They looked happy, carefree, and for some reason this sight caused me almost physical pain. The boat docked. The passengers began to disembark, where they were greeted by the hotel staff. Pearl and Odell, after receiving welcome cocktails and flower garlands, made their way to the front desk, which was set up right on the dock for the convenience of the guests. I watched as they approached a hotel employee as Odell held out some paperwork. The employee scrutinized them, then said something that made the smiles on Pearl and Odell's faces fade slightly. Mr. Pratt nodded to me. I think now would be a good time. He walked to the front desk. Captain Riviera and Officer Cruz followed him. I remained standing where I was, partially hidden by the lush tropical vegetation surrounding the dock. I wanted to see their reaction first before showing myself. I couldn't hear what Mr. Pratt was saying, but I saw the expressions on Pearl and Odell's faces change from bewilderment to concern, then to outright fear when they noticed the police officers. Odell began to gesticulate animatedly. His face flushed. Pearl looked confused. She looked around every now and then as if searching for a way out. Captain Riviera said something, pointing to the papers in the hotel employee's hands. Odell shook his head, his voice louder. I caught bits of phrases. Misunderstanding. My father-in-law. He insisted. Pearl remained silent, her head lowered. The moment of truth had come. I took a deep breath and stepped out of my hiding place, heading toward the group at the front desk. The first to notice me was Pearl. Her eyes widened, her mouth hanging open in mute surprise. She nudged Odell with her elbow and he turned around. His face was a spectrum of emotions: shock, disbelief, fear, and finally anger. "Dad?" Pearl finally found her voice. "What? How did you end up here?" I stepped closer, trying to remain calm. "Hello, Pearl. Hello, Odell. I flew in yesterday, on a direct flight from Minneapolis. Mr. Holt, what a surprise. We thought you'd decided to stay home. Why didn't you tell us you changed your mind?" His insolence was almost delightful. I looked at him straight on. "I didn't change my mind, Odell. I always planned to come here. You're the one who decided to leave me at home, even though the trip was bought and registered in my name." "Dad, we were just worried about your health," Pearl interjected. "You said yourself that you realized—" "I didn't say anything," I interrupted her. "I stood there silent while you made up one lie after another. About the children's room with the bunk beds, about the construction work, about the mosquitoes. It was all lies, Pearl, and you know it." Pearl blushed and lowered her eyes. Odell stepped forward. "Look, Mr. Holt, we may not have been completely honest with you, but we really wanted what was best for everyone. You wouldn't have been comfortable here, in this heat, with your health problems." "I don't have health problems, Odell," I said firmly. "I feel fine, and I'm quite comfortable in this villa, which I paid for out of my own pocket." Captain Riviera coughed, calling attention to himself. "If I may explain the situation from a legal point of view, the voucher and the villa are booked in the name of Mr. Ebner Holt. An attempt to use that reservation without his presence and consent could be considered fraudulent. Under normal circumstances, this could lead to arrest and charges." Odell's face turned white as chalk. "Arrest? You can't seriously—" "I can," replied the captain calmly. "But Mr. Holt doesn't want to bring formal charges given your family ties. But it is entirely up to him to decide whether you can stay in the hotel and on what terms." All eyes turned to me. I felt a strange mixture of power and bitterness. At last I could teach them a lesson, make them feel the consequences of what they had done. But at what cost? A complete break with my only daughter? You have two choices, I said, looking at Pearl and Odell. You can either leave the island immediately on the same boat that brought you, or you can pay for your own lodging. In another hotel, I added, seeing Odell open his mouth to object. You won't be staying in this villa. But Papa. Pearl looked like she was about to cry. We can't afford another hotel here. You know the prices here. We were counting on my money, I finished for her. On my generosity, as always. But this time you miscalculated. Odell put his arm around Pearl's shoulders. All right, Mr. Holt, we'll leave. But know that you're breaking your daughter's heart. She's been dreaming so much about this vacation. Don't you dare. I felt my anger boiling up inside me. Don't you dare manipulate me. You're the one who broke my heart when you decided to steal my gift, my dream of a family vacation. It was you who betrayed me by lying to my face and leaving me at home like an unwanted thing. Pearl cried for real. Daddy, please. We are sorry. We did the wrong thing. But would you really kick your own daughter out? I looked at her tears, and part of me wanted to soften, to give in, to forgive. But the other part, the part that remembered all the years of neglect, all the small and big betrayals, wouldn't let me. I'm not kicking you out, Pearl, I said quietly. I'm just not letting you keep using me. If you can't afford a vacation on this island at your own expense, then you don't belong here. The boat leaves in an hour. I think you should be on it. Odell clenched his fists but held back. Instead, he turned to Mr. Pratt. Can we arrange for us to go back to the mainland? Mr. Pratt nodded. Of course. A hotel employee will escort you to the waiting area and help you with your luggage. Pearl made one last attempt. Papa, please. We can talk this over, if only for the sake of the children. They've been looking forward to this trip. The children? I raised my eyebrows in surprise. Where are they, by the way? Pearl and Odell exchanged quick glances. Odell coughed. They stayed with Pearl's parents. We figured we'd check out the conditions first before we brought them in. Another lie. I shook my head. I see. Well, when you get home, tell them Grandpa sends his regards, and that he's sorry he couldn't see them this summer. I turned to Mr. Pratt. We're done. Thank you for your help. You're welcome, Mr. Holt, he replied. Captain Riviera, Officer Cruz, thank you for your cooperation. The cops nodded and stepped aside. I cast one last glance at Pearl and Odell, who were already being escorted to the waiting area by a hotel employee. Pearl turned around and our eyes met. Her gaze was a mixture of resentment, disappointment, and admittance of defeat. She knew she was wrong. She knew it, but she couldn't admit it out loud. I returned to the villa in a strange state of mind. On the one hand, I felt satisfied that justice had been done. On the other, I felt a deep sadness at the realization that there was a gulf between me and my daughter that might never be bridged. Thomas met me with a concerned look on his face. Are you all right, Mr. Holt? You look upset. I'm fine, Thomas, I replied, trying to smile. It's just a family emergency. Nothing I can't handle. Is there anything I can do for you? Maybe bring a cold drink or a light snack. Thank you, but I need some time alone. I'm going for a walk on the beach. I left the villa and walked along the beach, feeling the warm sand sagging beneath my feet. In the distance, I could see the pier where the boat with Pearl and Odell would be leaving soon. I stopped and looked in that direction for a long time, pondering the strange twists and turns of fate. My whole existence had been devoted to the care of my family. First Beatrice and Pearl, then the grandchildren. I've saved money, denied myself everything to keep them happy. And now, at the end of my life, I find myself alone in a luxury resort that I could afford by sheer luck, not years of labor. And my family, well, maybe I didn't have one for a long time. There was only an illusion, which I diligently maintained, closing my eyes to the obvious. The boat left at noon sharp. I could see its silhouette gradually drifting away to the horizon. With it went my last hope of reconciliation with my daughter. I knew Pearl would never forgive me for this humiliation, especially in front of Odell, whose ego must have been seriously damaged. But strangely enough, the thought didn't make me regret it. Instead, I felt something akin to liberation. No more having to pretend that everything was okay. No more having to hope that my daughter would one day understand and appreciate my sacrifices. No more need to be a convenient ATM or a free babysitter on demand. I was free. Free from illusions, from vain expectations, from the role of the perpetually guilty father who never quite reaches his daughter's expectations. And this freedom, for all its bitterness, felt like a breath of fresh air after years in a stuffy room. I continued my walk, enjoying the beauty of the surrounding nature. The turquoise sea, the white sand, the palm trees leaning over the water. All this now belonged to me alone. 2 weeks of complete peace, without the need to please anyone or care about anyone. Just me and this corner of paradise. When I returned to the villa, Mr. Pratt was waiting for me. "Mr. Holt, I wanted to make sure you were all right," he said with genuine concern in his voice. "Thank you, Mr. Pratt. I'm fine. It just takes a while to get used to the idea of being here alone." "I understand," he nodded. "If you need anything at all, just let me know. We want your vacation to be as comfortable as possible, despite the circumstances." "I appreciate that," I smiled. "You know, I think this vacation will be good for me, perhaps even more useful than I had originally thought." Mr. Pratt nodded understandingly. "Sometimes we don't get what we wanted, but what we really need. If I may offer some advice, savor every moment. This island has a special property to heal mental wounds." After he left, I sat on the terrace for a long time watching the play of light on the water. The sun was slowly sinking to the horizon, coloring the sky and the sea in shades of gold and purple. I thought of Beatrice, of our life together, of how she always knew how to find joy in the simple things. "You don't have to go to the ends of the earth to be happy, Ebner," she often said. "Happiness is always with you. You just have to be able to see it." Maybe she was right. Maybe real wealth is not in the money I won so unexpectedly, nor in the luxurious villa I now live in. It's in the ability to appreciate what you have and not let others take away your dignity and self-respect. With that thought in mind, I got up and headed to the bedroom to change for dinner. Tonight I decided to eat dinner in the main restaurant of the hotel rather than alone in the villa. It was time to start living life to the fullest without constantly looking over the needs and expectations of others. It was time to start living for myself. After all, I deserved it after all the years of sacrifice and deprivation. Deserved this sun, this sea, this peace. I earned the right to finally be happy, even if it didn't come in the way and with the people I expected.